So we're going to move into this panel with three wonderful speakers, Isabella Rossen from the Qatar Museums, Kenyatta Robinson from here in Washington, and Nokwanda Akiya Shabangu, who is going to join us from South Africa. But before to tee up this conversation, I just want to review some of the incredible stories that we heard in the workshops. The first is actually the organization that Kenyatta leads, and this is a neighborhood here in Washington, D.C. It has its own dedicated place management organization, and some of the amazing innovative practices that are occurring here around the circular economy, around empowerment and cultural activation. So we're really inspired by that. We're also inspired by some field work we conducted as part of this effort in Japan. And here's an example of a university-based place management organization just outside of Tokyo. And this organization is a partnership, a really extraordinary place-based partnership between a university, a city, and a property owner. And this mission associated with this organization is really around fostering excellence in the technology needed to foster a low carbon city, community resilience, and really exploring this process of how communities can, on their own terms, adopt new technologies to foster sustainable low carbon living. We heard amazing case studies from South Africa, really excellent stories, and we were particularly impressed by the conscientiousness associated with place management organizations, managing and working with stakeholders associated with trauma, social belonging, sharing economy, and providing digital access for economic and enterprise incubation. We heard amazing, also just totally inspirational stories from Qatar, and Isabella will join us here in a second to talk about this, really about the research process associated with placemaking initiatives. These are not just kind of one-off casual ideas. These were very, very intentional strategies informed by lots of place-based research to advance ideas and activities associated with climate change adaptation. And also very interesting, and also in light of Greg's comments right now, interesting attention to vernacular economies that are not as visible as one might think across the built environment. Incredible stories from New York City, including organizations whose place includes bodies of water, the Bronx River Alliance, and in some respects, traditional places within cities, a commercial street, but that have an extraordinary social diversity associated with them. And that's the Pitkin corridor. And then finally, just another example from here in Washington, we heard from another business improvement district that is really advancing environmental initiatives as part of its work, whether that be stormwater management to protect the rivers in Washington. And then we were especially impressed by the data collection activities associated with being certified as an urban district with the United States Green Building Council. So just very interesting diversification of data collection initiatives. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing screen. And I'd like to invite Isabella to offer some reflections, and both from the workshop, Isabella, and from what you've heard this morning from Greg or the opening session. Just really curious as to how you see this subject evolving in your area.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to join today. And yes, well, brief introduction. My background is urban sociology, and I work for Qatar Museums, the activation and programming of heritage in Doha. And so actually what was a very kind of striking point made by Greg was, of course, the fact that Qatar is not a democracy, and that this means in developing community projects that are around community participation and engaging citizens, that's a very different matter, actually, and has to be thought of in a different way here. But that doesn't make it less interesting. And I think the examples we shared during our regional session addressed this very much, and that indeed doing kind of careful and thorough research into the different communities and their needs, mapping that and visualizing that can be, well, is very important and informative in proposing different strategies for placemaking, or for initiatives such as the cricket shelters that were presented. So yeah, that's I think what my main takeaway, and also what I find very interesting to hear examples from other places that are not democracies, because I'm from Amsterdam, which is a lot about community participation, and of course that's a very different setting to work in. So Isabella, I think that, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Isabella. One of the things that I'm quite fascinated by, and I think is quite unique, is the fact that you're engaged in this activity, but also come at it from a museum. So I'm wondering if you could just offer a couple of reflections associated with the role of a museum in organizing place management activities.
Yes, definitely. So I work for Qatar Museums, indeed, which is quite a large organization encompassing several museums, but also heritage sites in the city. So with the renovation and redevelopment of these heritage sites, or what some of them have become creative hubs, so creative studio spaces. So Qatar Museums it's kind of branching outside of the museums in really doing programming and activation that is related to arts and culture in different spaces across the city. And I think the value is also, it's the knowledge about the research that's done about the history of certain places, and also the, let's say, built the history of the buildings and materials, and being very kind of detailed and careful in how that can be restored, and how stories can also be kept too. So that's where oral histories come in, and research and speaking to members of the community who were, for example, that was a project that was presented Liwan, this girls' school that has been that was a girls' school in the 50s and has now become a creative studio space, but still very much carrying the story of its previous use, and also being open to the community. Yeah, I hope that answers
No, that was
question.
fantastic. And, you know, we're just very impressed by those practices, of really thinking very sensitively, but also opportunistically around cultural opportunities in the built environment. I want to turn now to Nakwanda. I see you there. I hope you can hear me and participate. Nakwanda is in South Africa. And Nakwanda, we were just so impressed and excited by your story in the workshops, and we're wondering if you could offer some reflections on your social engagement strategies and how place becomes the frame for social innovation.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. It is so exciting. I mean, following the session that we had a few weeks ago, I've actually learned so much language in terms of being able to contextualize some of the things that we do, because oftentimes we actually don't understand the impact when you're so busy running on the ground. I mean, some of the strategies that we have is literally being hyperlocated. So only operating in Deep Slot for the last 10 years has allowed for us to be able to identify more nuanced challenges that wouldn't necessarily be able to be identified. So because we offer free printing facilities, we found a need from ECD practitioners, so early childhood development, that they actually needed resources and that they needed learning material. And so because we noticed this trend over time, we were able to, as a space or as a place rather, be able to offer more digital resources for the ECD practitioners, but also open the second toy library in Diepsloot. So it wasn't necessarily part of our strategy from the get-go, but having to evolve with I guess the community needs is something that being hyperlocated in one particular place allows for you to be able to pick up on. So I think our use of a shared model in terms of all of our resources and the place itself being multi-purposed allows for us to also be exposed to a lot of different touch points and a lot of different opportunities. So I think what I learned the best about the speaker right before, I think his name was Greg,
Yeah.
I really love this concept of innovation district, because that's ultimately what it is that we offer. Just by being a space that has dignity with running water, functional toilets, free internet, things that we often take for granted, we're able to actually allow for people to self-actualize, but to self-develop themselves. So we're more than just a business center. We're not an incubator. We actually are this community space that allows for people to be able to innovate beyond anything else. So I think that's really where the strategy element comes in, making use of not just your network, but the tangible resources that you have, so that the intangible can actually begin to actualize on its own. Not so much with the hand holding, but the space, or the place rather, allows for that to happen because it exists. So yeah, thank you. This whole conversation has been really eye-opening for me, and has allowed for me to understand that as a platform, that is actually our power. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily need to constantly look at what programs, what projects, what next, funding. If our doors are open, it's secure, it has running water, people are able to book the facilities, are able to book the resources, use our recording studio, use our content lab, make use of the toy library, make use of our gardens and the trees, and then we've won. That's it. That is actually the prize. We are the prize, and not having to look for ways to justify it. So I'm really chuffed, and I'm really grateful for being part of these conversations, because it helps me to gather this language, but also to like go a little bit easy on ourselves and not think that we're not doing a good job, because we're doing great.
You're doing extraordinary things. And Nakwanda, one of the things that I was especially impressed by is that not only are you offering access to services or technology, but you're also creating and shaping part of the built environment through your gardens for people to have the dignity of reflection, to have quiet moments that may not have access to in other parts of the built environment. I thought that was very, very, very powerful.
Thank you. No, it's so true. You know, we are a space, or a place rather, of aspirational reprieve. And so in a space like townships, like a township where in 12 square kilometers, close to 1 million people are living in that space, there is a lot of sensory overload. and there's not enough spaces where people can actually just exhale, where there's a space where there's absolutely no alcohol allowed on the premises. So you actually have to be of sober mind, to be able to make use of the space. So that's been really, really interesting. Something that I've learned quite recently is that autism is on the rise. And currently, I think it's 1 in every 34 children that is born with autism. And by 2030, it's going to be something along the lines of 1 in 29 or 28. So in a township, children are often categorized as naughty when they probably are autistic. And so when we offer some of these awareness and educational tools and resources to some of our participants, some of our ECD practitioners, we're giving them language and resources and tools to be able to deal with some of these challenges, and maybe not categorize children as naughty, but try and actually understand, could they be on the spectrum, and how do we help them then further to become better people? Because ultimately, if we can intervene at that stage, when people are still tiny and small and so much more receptive to learning, the quality of enterprises, the quality of innovation that could be taking place in a place like Deep Sloot 10, 20 years from now really does expand enormously. So I think that's something that you also helped, again, like I'm saying, helped us be able to register and see. And thank you very much for that compliment. I take it in my strides.
Thank you. Kenyatta, we're so impressed by the work that you're doing. And when you joined us at the beginning of this process, you joined us in your position as the coordinator of all of the business improvement districts in Washington. But I'm wondering if today you could put your local hat on and talk to us about your work in the Mount Vernon Triangle. And there are two things that we're especially impressed by. One is the fact that you have defined yourself as a community improvement district. And I'm wondering if you'd offer some reflections on what that really means to you. And then secondly, you have created some very, very innovative tools around advancing both kind of a sharing economy, but also a circular economy, the kind of economics of your community. And I'm wondering if you would talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for having me. I just wanted, before I go into those two questions, and I'm perfectly happy to answer those, I just want to go back to something that the previous presenter had said prior, and that was the case for our organizations continuing to exist. And it was a question that I got recently from a reporter in talking about our 20th anniversary. We're in our 20 years as an improvement district here in Washington. And, we're almost built out as a neighborhood. And then he said, so what's next? Do you still need to exist? And it was an interesting question because I live in a neighborhood that doesn't have an improvement district. And if the street lights out, I'll call 311 and have it replaced. Or if something wrong, we self-organize and we self-govern in our communities. And I think with anything, the value of the instrument or tool that you receive, the value has to be more than the cost, right? And so to the extent we can continue to show incremental value to the communities and stakeholders we serve, then I think absolutely there is the case that these organizations need to continue to exist. So I think that's something that we must all continue to focus on. And that is our ability to show the value in what we do transparently, that we're accountable to the people we serve and for the investments that they make in our organizations. And that we are able to deliver value in a way that is specific to the needs that they have, to their pain points. So I just wanted to address that specific question and offer my point of view on that. With respect to us being a community improvement district, that's correct. When we were started, like I said, 20 years ago, we were started with the intention of this neighborhood being a mixed-use downtown neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that was coming out of the urban renewal period here in Washington, D.C., where there were massive highways built all throughout the middle of the city. And you had a lot of disruption, a lot of disinvestment. Surface parking lots were basically all over the neighborhood. In fact, one of the local blogs, the tagline was not just parking lots anymore. Since then, over the last 20 years, we've had a massive amount of development and density here in the community. And it has started to and is fully achieved what that mission was, and that is to build a neighborhood where people could live, work, and entertain and visit. In fact, I was a resident here in Mount Vernon Triangle. I moved in 2005, so very early in this current iteration of its existence. And when I took the job as the head of the improvement district, I actually worked here as well. So the joke was I could leave my home at 8:30 and be at work at 8:30, which is true. My office was just a block away. And so we have really created within this community a place where people are able to live a high quality life in terms of the residential accommodations, the office users that we have here in the neighborhood, a number of associations that you may have heard of, like the DC Bar Association, the largest attorney bar association in the United States, the Association of American Medical Colleges. Think of the MCAT, every doctor has to take that. The AMC is located here, Department of Veterans Affairs, and some other association and nonprofit and legal employers as well. And so I would think in many respects, the community improvement district model was probably an idea ahead of its time, because now that we are working to recover from the pandemic here in Washington, D.C., there are more improvement districts around the nation's capital that are looking at bringing on more residential to help provide that balance for the fact that, not as many people are coming into the office. And so you're having an increased rate of office vacancy in some of our properties here. So many communities are looking at neighborhoods like Mount Vernon Triangle, like NOMA, like Capitol Riverfront in Southwest DC, as they look to reposition themselves to remain competitive within the markets that they serve. With respect to the circular economy concept, what Uba's speaking to is the fact that we created this program, and I have a sheet of them here, a sheet of certificates. They're called MVT bucks. And we did this right as people were beginning to come back to the office. We had one of our office users, APAC, they really wanted to welcome their employees back and show them that there were restaurants, places to go, places to get lunch or frequent or have a beverage after work, and that the neighborhood wasn't what they were seeing on television, and that is a place that's hollowed out with all of the stores being closed. In fact, during the pandemic, this particular neighborhood opened more businesses than we closed. And so we created this program called MVT Bucks, where essentially we give people free currency, and they're able to take them to about 15 of our businesses and receive goods, a meal or service on a dollar for dollar basis. And so all the retailer has to do is agree to manage to float for a couple of days until we can pay them electronically to compensate them for accepting these MVT bucks. We used to think about gift certificates, like real cash gift certificates. And if you're like me, you probably have a bunch of these gift certificates in your drawers at home, right? And so it's money that we put out that may not necessarily get spent. In this case, we only spend to the extent that someone actually uses. And so we know what the redemption rates of these are. So we may give out $100 in MVT bucks and receive $100 in positive utility and value from someone being happy for receiving these MVT bucks. Our businesses get promotion that way as well, but we may only spend 30 cents on every dollar for the MVT bucks that go out. So it's very efficient for us as well. But what it also does is it connects people to their businesses and people to their community. So when they come into the neighborhood, they get a postcard like this that says Mount Vernon Triangle and has the neighborhood on it. And so they're immediately connected to the place. And then they're invited to sign up for these MVT bucks, which we send to them, because the premise that we operate under is it's easier to keep a customer than it is to capture a new customer. So once people begin to identify and understand where the businesses are in their neighborhood and adopt a new favorite business, then their chance of going to that business on a more frequent basis or increased. We create that term, that circular economy that Uba spoke to before. I never thought about it in that sort of macroeconomic lens, that's what we were doing, but that's what we've created here, and it's been a very popular program. So we actually upped our adoption of this program with all of our new residents, the office workers who come to the office in the last year. We're just going to give these out, and hopefully they get spent. We got money in our budget to help compensate our businesses, and it seems to just be a very valuable program all the way around.
Thank you so much. And I do find it to be quite inspirational. And what I'd like to do next is invite Isabella and Nkwanda to also reflect on local economy. I think, Isabella, in your case, you presented an extremely interesting example, a case study of an economy that exists, but is not very visible. And also an economy that exists that has deep kind of cultural basis for it. And part of the place-based activities that you presented are really about strengthening an economy that might otherwise be understood as highly marginal, and maybe even at risk of being displaced. So, Isabella, I'm wondering if you could offer some reflections on that case again.
Yes, definitely. So Uwe is referring to a market that is a secondhand goods and building materials market in Doha. That's in a neighborhood where currently mostly low-income immigrants are living, and it's a very kind of vibrant market, but there have been several proposals to demolish and replace it. So the project we developed was looking into the role of the market, and actually the history also. It has been there for many years, and previously it was actually also a neighborhood many Qataris and the market many Qataris would go for their building materials. So I think our project really looked at the dynamics, and I think we really wanted to show the value of this space and why it would be very, let's say, detrimental to that neighborhood to replace the market. I don't know if you want me to
I think
address
that's
specific.
great. I think what I'd like everyone to offer some reflections on is this extremely interesting place-based expression of the kind of economic activity, but also cultural activity that make places what they are, that make them interesting, that make them unique. And I think your example is so interesting because it's a place that's kind of maybe overlooked or understood as being marginal in some sense, but in fact is totally unique and has a deep cultural history associated with it.
No, definitely. And I think it's also interesting because one of the proposals from maybe previously could have been to have a shopping mall there, which is the kind of more organized, planned space for, but which would lacks many of the qualities that this space actually has, and also which would, of course, exclude many of the people that go to this market now, because they are not, the shopping malls are not all accessible for everyone, and mostly for the communities that are in the current Souq al Haraj, they would not be able to enter or have their store in a shopping mall. So I think that's also part of the significance of looking at the value, or changing in a way, trying to discuss how you can improve the current market without replacing it by a commercial shopping mall.
Yeah, very interesting. Nkwanda, I'm wondering if you could offer some reflections on how kind of frameworks of social engagement that your place is also about, access to resources that may not otherwise be available in other parts of the neighborhoods and city, how that then translates into economic activity, One of the things that you had mentioned is, I guess there are different clubs and different meetings that end up forming, and I'm especially interested, again, how place is this place of, it's the location of integration between culture and knowledge and social relations, and really the emergence of economic activities.
Great question. So I think that some of the economic activity that's actually come out of this place that we've been managing for 10 years actually has allowed us to understand that in a space or in a place like Diepsloot, there's actually so much opportunity from understanding yourself, the business, as also the place that you operate from. So literally not having to have people think of themselves as having to have a store before they have a customer interaction. Literally having themselves think of themselves as these mobile businesses because of the fact that we offer this hot desk space and all of these shared resources. Today you're sitting at this station and the next day you're sitting at that station, but it doesn't necessarily change the access or the level of resource that it is that you have. So I think from a psychological point of view, it also allows people to not limit themselves to geographical location, but to rather start thinking of themselves as these metaphysical elements, really, that can connect with so many other people. I think another thing that's happened quite interestingly is the fact that we've created this ecosystem. So all of our participants that are part of our projects or programs, they actually know that everyone who's around them, irrespective of age, gender, skin color, is actually somewhat like-minded in the sense that they are looking to advance themselves. And so from a business point of view, people are now merging to one another in very interesting ways. We're seeing people who maybe would not have had exposure to understanding children actually leading Boy Scout groups, and then having to teach or to train or to be the guidance teacher of this group to help them generate their own income for some of the trips that they're wanting to do. So there's so many various touch points, but because of the element of diversity and them being able to be in the space and have all of the access to information, it allows for them to also have the opportunity for choice, which is often eliminated in situations of poverty, right? You cannot choose what color shirt you would get if it's donated to you. Whereas in our space, we definitely have, our dignity store where there is that element of choice. There is that element of saying, do I want to use a laptop or a PC or a tablet? Or do I want to use this camera or that camera? And that in and of itself allows somebody to really conceptualize their businesses on a different scale and makes them a lot more limitless because you're not bound by anything. You're not bound by, all of these confines, these traditional confines that we understand in terms of how a business must roll out, where a business must roll out, how it must conduct itself. You get to learn and see a lot of peer-to-peer learning taking place, whether we're facilitating it or not, because of this ecosystem that we've created.
Yeah, so interesting. Kenyatta, I'd like you to offer some reflections really from a very different perspective, because in your case, there's quite a lot of economic activity. There's a lot of investment occurring in your in your community, but many of your activities have been about fostering community, about fostering the culture of place through public art, through other activities. And I'm wondering if you could talk about this kind of intersection between economic activity and cultural activity as a way of bringing the community together. And I think what you mentioned before is really kind of like the technical aspects of how the Mount Vernon Bucks program exists, but this spills over into so many other things that you're doing, including this kind of extraordinary mural that you have now in your district that's really about the mission associated with climate change.
Yeah. First of all, I fundamentally believe that art and creative expression and the creation of places that people want to be, absolutely is foundational to robust economic activity. There is a lot of the concentric circles certainly overlap with respect to those two things. And one of the things that we know regarding the people who choose to live in this neighborhood is that they value inclusivity, they value diversity. They want to see expressions in all forms, whether it's photography art that we have around the neighborhood, or murals about climate change, or activation of a historic alley where 12 African-American families once lived when they couldn't live on the main streets. They want to understand, they want to see that place serve as a reflection of the values that they have. And we know that our community, they're deeply interested in larger societal issues. And so I feel like the work we do is merely a reflection of the wants and needs of the people that we serve, right? And so we start at that level and we say, what are people concerned about right now? They're concerned about climate. How do we tell this story in a way that's captivating, that's creative, that's attractive, that's large, using existing footprint that we already have, and that's an at-risk wall on a building that's 12 stories tall, that's going to capture the attention of everyone who comes by. And so really what we're doing is just mirroring demands and the wants and needs that people have, and we find ways to do it in a way that sort of melds into the public environment and a public space in a way that's very seamless and very natural, right? Using existing infrastructure that's there to tell those stories. We do that. We find opportunities to create additive value, for everyone involved, and sometimes that value also accrues to the people who own the properties. But certainly, there's a great deal of utility as well for the consumer who desires to be in places that not just provide them with shelter on a day-to-day basis, or a cup of coffee or a meal to eat, but a place that aligns with the values that they have. And I feel like once we're able to achieve that, finding a way to bring people and place together, then we've really created that additional additive value that creates community for everyone and makes the neighborhood a desirable place that people want to be.
Thank you. Isabella, Nakwanda, and Kenyatta, any parting thoughts as we close this part of the agenda?
Sorry, did you pose a question to me? Could you just repeat that?
Any parting thoughts as we close this part of the agenda?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think I'm in a constant phase of reflection currently, and I'm just really, really looking forward to being able to learn more from the rest of this program, because like I'm saying, the language that you're able to equip me with. I mean, I was just actually just saying to someone who I'm in the room with how much I enjoy the way that the speakers on this panel are actually phrasing some of their thoughts. So that's really what's nice about the synergy when you're merging all of these different minds, and I feel like that's really part of what it is that we do at our facility. So yeah, if you're ever in Joburg and you'd love to come and check out Deep Slot and understand how more peri-urban environments are flourishing, and how you can still have beautiful spaces or places in a place that is technically counted as, insignificant. Majority of people are living in environments such as Deep Slot, and the lack of infrastructure or the lack of resources is something that can actually be shifted, and it doesn't need us to be holding everyone's hand. It's just about providing that platform, literally having that element of dignity, but also having all of those resources, so that people do have that element of choice. And then from there, it really is up to people to self-actualize, because at the end of the day, there's a lot that people must work through for themselves. And there's only so far that any type of community space or innovation district can take a person. So yeah, we prioritize ourselves with quality over quantity. And so for the mere fact that people in Diepsloot actually do feel like they matter in our space really does make my days, irrespective of how exhausted I am. So thank you. That's my only parting remark. And I really look forward to listening to the rest of the speakers and the rest of the discussions.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll just say really quickly, Uba, how we think about those places that may be outside of our formal boundaries. So the places adjacent to my boundary that may not pay into our system is just as important to how we think about the places that are within our boundaries. There are certain spillover effects, right, from the work that we do that may occur outside of our boundaries. And there may be situations outside our boundaries that may impact us. So I think we cannot be so rigid as to think my improvement district only, and that's where my sole focus is. But really within the boundaries and the borders around those areas are equally important as well. I've been fortunate to be given by my board of directors some latitude to, involve myself in matters of public safety and poverty alleviation outside of our boundaries, so we can ensure there's spillover benefits. And that the winners and losers aren't as discrete as whether you're within the bid or not within the bid, right? But that, there could be benefits to everyone that are additive as a result of the economic activity that we do.
That's nice. Isabella, you have the last word.
Also very brief, but I definitely think it's a very inspiring exchange, and I would love to see if there's some kind of best practices or conclusions drawn that we can all learn from, and that you as organization, having seen all the sessions and talked to all the participants, that you draw from that. It would be amazing to learn more from all of the different cases, and to see which are kind of ideas and planning mechanisms that have been shared and that can be that we can learn from.
Yes,
thank you.
And we'll definitely be archiving all of the videos and preparing a report for UN Habitat that will be available for all. So that is definitely our intention. I'd like to thank each of you. Thank you so much. Such an insightful and inspiring dialogue. And what I'd like to do now is take a very, very brief, maybe 3-minute stretch break. And we're going to convene the next segment with Christopher Leinberger in 3 minutes at 10:35. So thank you, everyone. Just a brief 3-minute pause right now.